You made a decision this morning before your brain was even fully awake. You reached for your phone, you chose what to eat, you picked which lane to drive in, which email to open first, which person to trust the moment they walked through the door. And at no point during any of it did you stop and think. Not really, because there is a force running underneath every single choice you make. Ancient, invisible, incredibly powerful, and it has been steering your life since the day you were born. The strange part? Scientists have known about it for decades, and most people still don't believe it applies to them. Here is what they found. In 1974, two Israeli psychologists named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published a paper that would eventually change the way humans understand themselves. The paper was called Judgment Under Uncertainty, and what it revealed was deeply uncomfortable. When people make decisions, they almost never use logic. They use shortcuts, mental rules of thumb baked into the brain over hundreds of thousands of years of survival. Kahneman called them heuristics, and the uncomfortable truth is that these heuristics are not bugs in your thinking. They are the entire operating system. Your brain runs two systems simultaneously. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional. It handles roughly 96% of all the decisions you make every single day. It doesn't ask questions, it just acts. System 2 is slow, deliberate, analytical. It is the part of you that feels like you. But here is what Kahneman discovered after a lifetime of research. System 2 is almost never in charge. Think about what that means. 96% of your choices today were made by a system you did not consciously activate. A system that did not ask your permission. A system built not for your modern life, but for a world that no longer exists. This is the force, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Your ancestors lived in a world where information was simple and danger was everywhere. When something moved in the grass, you didn't have time to sit down and carefully weigh the probability that it was a predator versus the wind. Your brain had to decide in milliseconds. The ones who hesitated died. The ones who reacted survived, and over hundreds of thousands of years, that lightning-fast, shortcut-driven system was refined into something extraordinarily efficient. The problem is that you are now living in a world your brain was never designed for. You are surrounded by thousands of decisions every single day. What to buy, who to vote for, which investment to make, which information to believe. And your ancient System 1 is still in charge, still using the same shortcuts it used on the savannah, still treating modern problems like survival problems, still making snap judgments before you even realize a decision was made. Let's start with one of the most powerful shortcuts of all. It is called the anchoring effect, and it is running your financial life whether you know it or not. In one of Kahneman and Tversky's most famous experiments, participants were asked to spin a wheel of fortune rigged to stop only at 10 or 65. Then they were asked, what percentage of African nations are members of the United Nations? The two numbers are completely unrelated. The wheel of fortune is random. And yet the group who spun 65 guessed 45%. The group who spun 10 guessed 25%. A random, meaningless number changed their answer by 20 percentage points. Why? Because your brain, when faced with an uncertain question, instinctively grabs onto the nearest available number and uses it as a starting point, the anchor, even when you know it is irrelevant, even when you are trying to ignore it. Your System 1 has already made the comparison before your System 2 can intervene. This is why the original price tag on a sale item changes what you are willing to pay. This is why a salary negotiation, where the employer speaks first, almost always ends lower than one where you speak first. This is why a restaurant with a single extremely expensive bottle of wine on the menu sells far more mid-range bottles than a restaurant without one. The expensive bottle is never meant to be bought. It is an anchor, and it works every time. But anchoring is only the beginning. There is another shortcut your brain uses constantly. You use it when reading the news, when scrolling through social media, when deciding who to trust. Kahneman called it the availability heuristic, and it is quietly distorting your entire picture of reality. The availability heuristic works like this. Your brain judges how likely something is by how easily an example comes to mind. If you can quickly think of a plane crash, planes feel dangerous. If you struggle to remember a car accident, cars feel safe. The ease of retrieval becomes the measure of probability. Here is the result. You are statistically far more afraid of the wrong things. After the September 11th attacks, psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer studied what happened to American behavior. Millions of people chose to drive instead of fly in the months following the attacks. Plane crashes were vivid in the mind, easy to remember, therefore they felt likely. But cars are statistically 30 times more deadly per mile than commercial aircraft. The shift to driving caused an estimated 1,600 additional road deaths in the year following the attacks. The availability heuristic killed more Americans than the terrorists did. Let that sit for a moment. Your brain is not measuring risk. It is measuring vividness. The more dramatic, the more recent, the more emotionally charged a memory is, the more your System 1 weights it as probable. And in a media environment designed to feed you the most alarming information possible, your ancient shortcut is being weaponized against you every single day. This is not an accident. Now here is the twist that most people never see coming. You are not just a passive victim of these shortcuts. In many cases, you are actively defending them. Psychologist Leon Festinger first described the mechanism in 1957. He called it cognitive dissonance. When new information conflicts with an existing belief, the brain experiences something close to physical discomfort. And rather than updating the belief, which would require effort, System 1 does something far simpler. It rejects the information. This is why people who have already made a major decision, bought a house, chosen a career, picked a political party, become substantially harder to persuade with facts. Their identity is now connected to that decision. And the brain protects identity like it protects a wound. Any new information that challenges the decision gets filtered, minimized, or discarded. Any information that supports it gets amplified. Festinger called this confirmation bias, and it does not weaken the more intelligent a person is. In a landmark study, researchers at Stanford found that highly intelligent people were actually more skilled at rationalizing bad information, not at recognizing it. The smarter you are, the better your brain is at constructing a convincing story to protect a conclusion it has already reached. Your intelligence can be the very thing that keeps you stuck. So where does this leave you? Every day you wake up and you feel like you are making choices. You feel like you are evaluating options. You feel like you are in control. But underneath the feeling of control, System 1 has already made most of the important calls. It has already anchored your expectations to the first number it saw. It has already inflated the probability of the most recent threat and deflated the probability of the real one. It has already rejected the information that challenged what you already believe, and there is something even deeper driving all of it. It is called loss aversion, and Kahneman considered it the single most powerful force in human decision-making. Here is how it works. The pain of losing something is roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. Losing $20 feels approximately twice as bad as finding $20 feels good. Your brain is not calibrated to pursue gain. It is calibrated to avoid loss. This asymmetry was adaptive. In a survival environment, losing was almost always more catastrophic than gaining was beneficial. Losing your shelter, your food, your tribe was fatal. Gaining a little extra was just nice. So the brain evolved to be profoundly loss-averse, to weight potential downside far more heavily than potential upside. But in modern life, this bias costs you constantly. It is why people stay in careers they hate, rather than risk the uncertainty of a new one. It is why investors hold failing stocks far longer than logic recommends, waiting for them to return to the original price, because selling feels like locking in a loss. It is why you keep subscriptions you never use, because canceling them feels like giving something up. The status quo always feels safer than change, even when change is clearly the better option. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in 2017 for studying exactly this. He called it the endowment effect. What you own, you overvalue. What is familiar, you prefer. Not because it is better, because it is yours, because it is known, and your ancient brain treats the unknown as danger. Now ask yourself this honestly. How many of your major choices in the last 5 years were actually choices? How many were defaults? How many were anchored by someone else's number? How many were shaped by the most vivid memory you happen to carry, rather than the actual probability? How many were quietly designed to avoid loss rather than pursue what you genuinely wanted? This is not a reason to spiral. It is a reason to pay attention. because understanding the system is the only way to step outside it, even briefly. Kahneman was honest about this. He spent his entire life studying these shortcuts, and he still fell prey to them. He called it the planning fallacy, our tendency to underestimate how long things will take, how much they will cost, how hard they will be, because we focus on the best case scenario rather than a realistic one. He discovered it in research teams, then he watched it happen in his own research team. He could diagnose the bias in others with precision. He could not stop it in himself. That is the honesty this requires. You are not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It is running ancient, efficient, battle-tested software on a machine that now lives in a world its developers never imagined. A world of infinite information, manufactured scarcity, algorithmic feeds calibrated to trigger loss, aversion, and availability bias simultaneously, prices set to exploit anchoring, headlines engineered for vividness, your ancestors' brain, your world's tools. This is not a coincidence. The entire architecture of modern commerce, media, and politics has been built around the knowledge that these shortcuts exist and can be triggered. Every sale price, every breaking news alert, every political advertisement, every app notification. Someone understood System 1 before you did, and they built a world around it. But here is what they did not account for. The moment you name the system, it loses some of its power. Not all of it. That would be too easy. But some. The next time you feel a certainty arrive, instantly and fully formed, ask where it came from. The next time you feel a strong urge to dismiss a piece of information, ask whether you are dismissing it because it is wrong or because it is uncomfortable. The next time a sale price makes something feel like a deal, ask what the price would feel like if you had seen it first, without the original number beside it. You will not become immune. No one does. But you will begin to notice the space between the shortcut and the conclusion. And in that space, something genuinely rare becomes possible. An actual choice. You made a decision this morning before your brain was even fully awake. Most of the decisions you will make today were already made for you, by forces older than memory, running faster than thought. But the one you are making right now, to notice them, to name them, to look for the space between reflex and response, that one is yours. That might be the most important choice of all.